Hello there, little masters, and welcome to the Prancing Pony podcast, where tonight, well, the good stuff may just give you the right answers by accident.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Gollum's my Smeagol, Alan Sisto.
Okay, no, that might be a little bit much.
Too far on that one?
Maybe. I don't know that we're two sides of the same coin quite. I mean, I know we agree all the time, but not all the time.
Not all the time, no. And when we argue, it's like talking to ourselves.
Well, folks, tonight we continue the Hobbit Chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark. We'll conclude the riddle game, and then we'll see what comes next when Gollum realizes he's misplaced something very valuable.
One might say he's misplaced something precious. Speaking of which, we have some more of my illustrious co-host's wonderful Gollum voice, and maybe a bit more of what I just gave you there, if I decide to let him give his poor throat a break. And I know you've got some long ones in this one.
That. We do, but yours is awesome, so I'm glad to hear it.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
As we mentioned in our last episode, we are covering this chapter in 3 episodes so that we can bring in passages from the first edition and discuss in detail some of those changes that Tolkien made to bring this story up to date with the expanded ideas about the ring from the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and this episode, this middle part of this chapter is where we're really going to start seeing some of those changes, really big changes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we get into any of that, we've got another installment of one of my favorite segments, Philology Fair.
Yes, we do.
I could listen to that music all day.
You know I'm going to have to play it again when you say that, though, right?
I'm doing a little jig when you play it. So this episode releases on December 10th. So we've got a nice, warm midwinter word for you today. Now, we've still got one more episode before we get to the holidays, Christmas or Hanukkah or Yule for you hobbits of the Shire that might be listening.
Yes.
But either way, there's a good chance that you may be eating chestnuts or at least hearing songs about them at the mall.
Well, yeah, that seems more likely. I don't know that I've ever eaten a chestnut. I've just heard about it.
I've had chestnut dressing. I think chestnut dressing is somewhat traditional in England. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it used to be traditional in England, but I've had that before. But it's not.
Is it traditional in Austin, Texas?
No, it's more cornbread dressing here in Austin, Texas, so, as well as in New Orleans. But yeah, so you're definitely at least hearing about chestnuts, possibly the ones that are roasting on an open fire.
That's the one.
But it just so happens...
Right next to Jack Frost's
That's
nose,
right, yeah. Well, it just so happens that Bilbo and Gollum have actually been throwing around the word chestnut in this chapter. But just like Vizzini's use of inconceivable, I do not think that means what you think it means. So what I wanted to do today is look at the etymology of the word chestnut and see how it came to be used in the way Tolkien uses it here. Mm-hmm. So the word chestnut traces its roots to Greek, kastanea, which meant both the nut and the tree it comes from. Ancients thought it was named after either a place called Castania or Castanea, which is either a place near the Black Sea in modern Turkey, or a place called Castania in Thessaly, which is in part of Greece today. So that's what the ancients believed. Actually, experts today believe that both of these places were probably named for the tree and not the other way around. Okay. And so the name was probably borrowed into Greek from some other language. Well, however it got to Greek, the Greek Castania or Castanea became Latin Castanea, which became chastain in Old French, and eventually chestin in English. Now, in the 1500s, the English were calling the nut of the chestin tree a chestin nut, which is technically a little redundant because it originally meant the nut too. But at any rate, the chestin nut is what eventually got shortened to chestnut.
So, well, folks, I'm sure by now you're thinking that's all well and good, but when Gollum hisses, chestnuts, he's not talking about trees in Turkey or the nuts that fall from them.
No.
And of course, you'd be right. As Douglas Anderson tells us in a note to this chapter, Gollum's usage of chestnut is slang, meaning an old, well-known joke or tale, which this particular riddle is. Which begs the question, how did a word for a nut or tree become a word for an old, well-known saying? Well, fortunately, I have a word nerd handy, and Sean has an answer.
I certainly do. The most common explanation that you'll find on this, this actually appears in the Online Etymology Dictionary, which is a great resource for word nerds. The Oxford English Dictionary calls this plausible, which is probably as much of a mark of approval they're going to get. Yeah, exactly. Without proof. But basically the story is that it comes from an 1816 play by a playwright named William Diamond, called The Broken Sword. In this play, there's two characters, Captain Xavier and Pablo, who are talking. And I'm going to admit, I have not read this play.
I was going to say, you're really digging into something.
I read a few lines of this scene just to prepare for this segment. But
okay, thank you for making us not feel entirely inadequate next to your great prowess of knowledge.
No idea what this play is about. But I do know that there's one scene where the Captain Xavier, is telling a story that this other character, Pablo, has heard him tell 27 times. And as the captain is telling the story, he says, well, there was this cork tree. And then Pablo corrects him by saying, a chestnut, Captain, a chestnut. The joke being that Pablo has heard the story so many times that he knows the details better than the captain himself.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly Princess Bride or Monty Python funny, although it does remind me a little of 1, 2, 5, 3, sir.
3, sir.
But
and thou shalt launch thy holy hand grenade towards thy foe, who, being naughty in my sight,
shall snuff it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So,
I cannot. I just
you can't think of Monty Python without dropping a couple of lines
finish
in.
a line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently,
You're lucky you don't get more.
Right, I know. We would be here all night. I'm sure we could keep it up for a while. But apparently it was funny enough in 1816 that the idea of a chestnut being a very old story or saying that the listener has heard a bunch of times started to spread. And by 1885, this meaning was in common use.
1885. So that means that when Gollum uses it, and when Bilbo, I believe, uses it later in this episode, it's just another anachronism.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, you probably wouldn't pick up on that unless you're a philologist or maybe a person who knows way more about early 19th century theater than we do. But
or a listener of the Prancing Pony podcast.
Well, there you go. And that's why we do it. That's why we do what we do.
Well, folks, let's go ahead and get on with the discussion. Gollum's in a little bit of a foul mood now after that Sun on the Daisies riddle that we left with last week. And I'm going to go ahead and have Sean start out with this first read.
Yeah. They reminded him of days when he had been less lonely and sneaky and nasty, and that put him out of temper. What is more, they made him hungry, so this time he tried something a bit more difficult and more unpleasant.
It cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt. It lies behind stars and under hills, and empty halls it fills. It comes first and follows after, ends life, kills laughter.
Unfortunately for Gollum, Bilbo had heard that sort of thing before, and the answer was all round him anyway. Dark, he said, without even scratching his head or putting on his thinking cap. Definitely seeing a darker side of Gollum right away. He really, you said it, he really is getting angry. And these riddles, his first couple of riddles were, they were kind of dark, but I mean, now he's really just explicitly mentioning death and killing in all of his riddles. So,
well, he is hungry.
That is true, yeah.
That's kind of the thing.
The subtext is becoming text.
Yes, it is. That's a very good way to put it. I love that Bilbo doesn't even have to think twice.
Yeah, I know. I love that. Yeah.
And
it's another of those cases, we see this a couple times, actually. I think we're about to see it in a minute. Gollum thought it was a hard one, but he's surrounded by it. So, of course he's thinking about it. Of course, Bilbo's thinking about it.
But I wonder, see, it took him a while to remember the sun, which is the answer to the previous, to the one that we wrapped up last week which was the Daisy riddle.
Yeah.
Since the sun was hard for him to think of, I wonder if he thought the dark would be hard for Bilbo to think of.
Interesting.
And it makes me think of this idea that, and I don't know if I'm stretching it or reading too much into it, so, like you said last week, you tell me if I'm reading too much into this. Light can conceive of both light and dark, while dark can only think of dark. Or at least easily.
That's a good thought. So Bilbo can remember Bilbo being...
Bilbo knows what the absence of light is.
That's interesting.
But he also knows light. And on the other hand, Gollum only knows the absence of light.
That's
now.
interesting. Yeah, there could be something to that.
He knows nothing else.
There could very well be something to that. Gollum has just become so dark at this point that he can only think of dark things.
Well, I keep coming back to that description. He was dark as darkness.
That's right. We talked about that last time.
I mean,
I think you're onto something there.
His nature.
That's a good thought.
So, well, then we get the really cool egg riddle, which we won't read, but is an awesome riddle that once again goes back to a number of medieval sources, I believe, or at least maybe 18th century sources. I don't recall. Maybe you have some.
I think actually
on
this one, this is one that Anderson did say was in a nursery rhymes book that I think was a little bit later. I think is probably one of the Victorian ones.
19th century, 1800s, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And certainly there's we talked last time about how Bilbo's riddles tend to be more Victorian and quaint. Gollum's tend to be more mythical and ancient and a little creepier.
Yeah. And that makes sense. He's also older. His riddles would come from an older time.
That's a good point too. Yeah.
500 years ago. It's not like he's finding new material down here in the dark.
It's not like the blind fish are telling him all these great new riddles that they just heard down at the pond.
Hey, Gollum, did you hear the last one? Did you hear the latest?
Did you hear the one about the eggs?
But a blind fish and a watcher in the water walk into a bar.
Oh man.
Oh goodness.
But yeah, I think it's there's definitely something quaint and Victorian about this egg riddle. And it certainly speaks to this comfort that Bilbo's missing. We even saw in the last episode that he was thinking about bacon and eggs because he was hungry.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Here he is thinking about food again. Mm-hmm. And he thinks this is an easy one. He thinks it's a dreadfully easy chestnut. There's
the word. Yep.
But boy, did Gollum just have a really hard time with this.
Yeah.
I love Bilbo's little comment here. Well, the answer's not a kettle boiling over, as you seem to think from the noise you're making.
A little bit of trash talk there.
Yeah, it's trash talk. This is total trash talk. He's feeling confident. He's prodding Gollum. Dangerous, really.
Oh, it is.
Certainly a little overconfidence here.
He's kind of poking the bear here.
He really is.
But they're both getting impatient. I mean, you really see. Yeah. It's really not just a game anymore for either of them. The stakes are high. Especially now that Gollum is actually hungry, and he knows what he's going to get out of this.
Yeah. Otherwise, he's just going to get some more cold fish.
Yeah. And we talked about last time. We talked about how when Bilbo gets Tookish, he tends to get a little bit cocky, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing here in him.
We are seeing that. So Gollum eventually remembers it, but he doesn't remember it from a nice context. He remembers it from thieving.
I know. That's big. That's very significant.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this is something that he, this isn't a comfort thing like it is for Bilbo. It is this recollection of taking eggs from nests, not of raising chickens, and cultivating your eggs.
Yeah.
It's
thieving from
nests.
nests, stealing eggs from nests,
and sucking eggs. Which come on, really?
I've never.
Is that a
I've
thing?
never done that. I don't know who does that.
I never even knew anybody. I mean, I think when I was in the 5th grade, people told me to do that. Right? That's what the.
Oh yeah, like go suck eggs or something like that.
Go
it's kind
suck
of like
eggs or something.
It's kind of just a
play yard insult
or
something. But I has anybody ever done that? I don't know. Is there maybe some of our listeners from different cultures could tell us? Is that something that we just are missing?
Yeah, I don't know.
And if so, maybe we're missing out.
I mean, I've eaten a raw egg, but I've never sucked it out of the shell.
Out of a shell? No, I can't say I'd do that. Probably my fear of salmonella would keep me from doing that. Then again, my fear of salmonella would keep me from eating the raw egg in the first place. I'm not trying to be Rocky Balboa, so I'm not sure what the point is.
Every once in a while, I've had a raw quail egg at a sushi restaurant. It's kind of fun.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
I'm not sure it does, but it worked for me at the time.
Yeah, what you can't see is me sticking my tongue out and trying not to retch.
Well, Gollum's eating worse.
I don't even want to know what he's eating.
It's better than Goblin. Let's put it that way.
It's better than Goblin. That's a pretty
not
low
a
bar.
ring endorsement.
No. I mean, I'm thinking the kangaroo burgers that Jack in the Box served back in the 80s are probably better.
Oh, man. Come to Hardee's.
Remember that controversy? They were like caught using kangaroo meat or something like that?
I do remember something like that, although I grew up in the South and we didn't have a Jack in the Box. So I remember hearing the story but not really knowing what Jack in the Box was, except that it sounded like a very strange name for a restaurant.
It does seem like a very strange name for a restaurant. It is a very strange name for a restaurant. Oh, goodness. Yeah. All right. Well, now that we've digressed in the first 15 minutes of an episode, just a touch, I'm going to go ahead and pick up after the eggs' answer. Then he asked,
"A life without breath, as cold as death, never thirsty, ever drinking, all in mail, never clinking."
He also, in his turn, thought this was a dreadfully easy one because he was always thinking of the answer, but he could not remember anything better at the moment. He was so flustered by the egg question. All the same, it was a poser for poor Bilbo, who never had anything to do with the water if he could help it. I imagine you know the answer, of course, or can guess it as easy as winking, since you are sitting comfortably at home and have not the danger of being eaten to disturb your thinking. Bilbo sat and cleared his throat once or twice, but no answer came. After a while, Gollum began to hiss with pleasure to himself.
"Is it nice, my precious? Is it juicy? Is it scrumptiously crunchable?"
He began to peer at Bilbo out of the darkness. "Half a moment," said the Hobbit, shivering. "I gave you a good long chance just now."
"It must make haste, haste,"
said Gollum, beginning to climb out of his boat onto the shore to get at Bilbo. But when he put his long, webby foot in the water, a fish jumped out in a fright and fell on Bilbo's toes. "Ugh," he said, "it's cold and clammy." And so he guessed. "Fish! Fish!" he cried. "It is fish!" Wow. Wow. Oh, goodness.
Very fortunate that.
Very fortunate. I mean, we'll see that at the end, the narrator even says he was saved by pure luck. Kind of looks like that was the case here, too.
Yeah, I think luck is definitely a big part of it. I do still notice that Gollum puts his foot in the water first, and then that's what makes the fish jump out. So
his overconfidence
kind of created the situation for for luck to jump in. And
had he been patient, the answer might not have come.
Yeah, exactly. So Gollum's mistake and Bilbo's luck, I think, contribute to this one. The fish riddle, I should point out, the fish riddle is one that we will find in a longer form in Two Towers, won't we?
Yes.
Because the poem that ends with the "so juicy sweet."
This is when he's at the fountain or at the water at the window on the west.
Is it there? I think that's where it is.
I think it is when he's by himself down below.
That's where it is in the movie. Is it there?
That's where it is in the film. You're right. I don't think that's where it is in the book. Now that I think about it,
it might be earlier. I want to say it's in the Passage of the Marshes, maybe.
Maybe.
But at any rate, when there is a point at which he gives a longer version of this poem that ends with that we only wish to catch a fish so juicy sweet.
It is the Passage of the Marshes.
Okay,
my mistake.
Yeah. Well, you can be forgiven for those movies are. I mean, that's one of those things about anything with Gollum. Andy Serkis has so inhabited that character. It is kind of hard to read some of this stuff without seeing him, seeing the things he did in the movie, and and even in the Hobbit movies, which we're not big fans of. I mean, his stuff is some of the best.
Oh, his performance is phenomenal.
Yeah,
really is. But you're right. Yeah, it's. Something that we see, like you said, in a longer frame. It's also, by the way, I just would note, and this kind of goes for all of these, we're starting to see that even though these have been tough for each of them, the egg was tough for Gollum, and now the fish was tough for Bilbo, they still are relatively able to answer each other's riddles. And, I think we mentioned this last time, that, Gandalf talks to Frodo in Shadow of the Past about this commonality in their background, of their, I think as he puts it, of their minds and memories that was very similar. He goes on to say that they understood one another remarkably well, very much better than a hobbit would understand, say, a dwarf or an orc or even an elf. Think of the riddles they both knew, for one thing. So, clearly this is evidence that there's a lot more commonality.
There's a commonality between the two of them, and in Lord of the Rings that becomes evidence for the fact that Gollum was a Hobbit. We talked last time about the fact that it doesn't look like Tolkien originally intended for Gollum to be a Hobbit, but still, we find a few of these little similarities throughout this chapter, even in the first edition. And so I think Tolkien is definitely showing us that there is some commonality between the two of them. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. There are a couple other little things worth catching here. One is that Bilbo doesn't have anything to do with water if he could help it. That's a good Hobbity thing.
Yeah. They don't like water.
Hobbits
they don't like boats.
water.
They don't like any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I guess they don't.
That was interesting.
I guess they don't really eat much fish. I don't know. I kind of imagine them eating everything, but if they don't fish,
if somebody puts it in front of them, they'll eat it. But who's going to go fishing?
Right. That's true. Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe from the bank, sit on the bank.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, cast the fly out there.
Yeah.
We get another fourth wall break, and this is a pretty strong one. The narrator turns to the reader.
You know the answer.
Or at least you can guess it.
Guess it as easy as winking. Yeah.
And here you are. You're sitting comfortably at home.
Yeah.
Really powerful fourth wall break.
Yeah.
That, we don't. It's not the last one we get, but it's interesting to call those out.
That is a really interesting one because it contrasts the reader, the listener, with Bilbo. So often those fourth wall breaks. I don't know, maybe not in all cases. I guess some of those fourth wall breaks do seem to sort of...
Yeah, they're to help us identify
with them. Exactly. Mm-hmm. This one is kind of a, hey, don't criticize him for not figuring this easy one out because you don't have this
Put yourself in his
thing
shoes.
Threatening to eat you. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, this is a reminder... This doesn't identify the reader with him so much as it reminds the reader to identify with him. Put yourself in his shoes.
Yeah.
You don't have, you're sitting at home. Put yourself where he is, and you too would have a hard time with this supposedly easy riddle.
Yeah. So. Yeah, definitely.
But we'll definitely get more on the luck thing. I think that's huge here. I mean, this is, like you said, Gollum has a part to do with it because he's the one who put his foot into the water. And if he hadn't, in theory, the fish wouldn't have jumped out.
Mm-hmm. But all he did was step into the water. I mean, Bilbo's the, I'm sorry, the fish just jumped out. It's Bilbo's luck that made that happen.
Yeah.
Without Bilbo's luck, he might have just stepped into the water and not disturbed a fish, and then Bilbo would not have gotten it.
Yeah, but of course, he needed to survive and not be eaten, so he finds the fish.
Yep.
Well, you've got my favorite riddle.
Well, it's
if the Daisies is maybe my second favorite.
Daisies is close.
This one's my favorite.
This one's just a lot of fun. And I'm going to pick up right from where you left off.
Yeah.
Gollum was dreadfully disappointed, but Bilbo asked another riddle as quick as ever he could, so that Gollum had to get back into his boat and think. No legs lay on one leg, 2 legs sat near on 3 legs, 4 legs got some. It was not really the right time for this riddle, but Bilbo was in a hurry. Gollum might have had some trouble guessing it if he had asked it at another time. As it was, talking of fish, no legs was not so very difficult, and after that the rest was easy. Fish on a little table, man at table sitting on a stool, the cat has the bones. That, of course, is the answer, and Gollum soon gave it.
Yeah, definitely the wrong time.
Definitely the wrong time. I mean, we talked about initiative last time. Bilbo
this is response. This is reactive.
He's completely lost the initiative. He's not even reacting with something creative. He's basically just that. The answer to that one was fish, so the answer to this one is here's another one that has fish in the answer.
Now that you're thinking about fish, let me give you one about fish.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's really a profound tactical error on his part.
Yeah. This is a weak move.
Mm-hmm. like we're watching the chess game. Like
exactly.
That,
what are the commentators?
That one would have the question mark after it in the notation.
This is like the obvious draw on 3rd and 27. Right. I mean, of course they're just going to run a draw.
Yeah. So of course, Gollum, what does he do? Gets it right.
Well, once you figure out the fish, the rest is easy. I love this joke though, or the riddle, I should say.
I love it too.
And I loved our conversation we had with Corey Olson on it.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, apparently
these coming up with that hashtag, right?
Yes, hashtag four legs got some. And in fact, I'm sure that'll end up in the Twitter for
I am
this
sure
episode.
it will.
But
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, it's just fun. Four Legs Got Some. And
It is
apparently
fun.
these leg riddles were pretty common in
Yeah.
I think
I
in
read a couple of
Anglo-Saxon.
other examples.
Yeah. And there's even one, I mean, like there's the riddle of the Sphinx, which that's Greek.
Well,
but,
yeah.
that's
Classic.
That's about, legs. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fun one. And it's interesting that this is one that is sort of in a different structure than the others. The other ones are pretty straightforward poetry. This is basically just a sentence. I'm not really sure if there's anything to make of that.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know if maybe
You're right.
It's sort of meant to accentuate Bilbo's lack of creativity with this one. The haste with which he's coming up with this one. I don't know, but it strikes me that that this one doesn't.
You're right. With all the others being in verse form.
Yeah.
And rhyming verse form at that.
Yeah.
Here we get something that's just simply not. That's an excellent catch.
And even just
the
the way the text is formatted on the
that.
page. The others are all set
you're
apart
right.
clearly
Set
as poetry.
apart.
This one's right in there. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be another case of us digging too deep, but I do think it's interesting. This one
We
comes
don't
off as
do that, do we?
No, never.
You and me, we don't.
Never,
No.
never. But this one does come across as a bit more prosy and less creative. Although I love it because, just Four Legs Got Some just makes me laugh
Four Legs
every
got
single
some.
time I see it.
We're all rooting for Four Legs to get some. So that's
Four Legs has been waiting for a long time for a little bit of no legs, and
oh man,
the cat,
yes, he
the
has.
cat's gotten the bones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cat deserves the bones.
Cat deserves the bones. Cat, it's a cat. It deserves to choke on the bone.
Hey,
I'm
hey,
just
no.
kidding. I kid.
Hey,
I kid because I
man.
love. I am going to get a lot of emails about that. So let me just explain. I was totally kidding.
No,
I may tease Sean about
we have
his
a
love
cat
of
and dog
cats,
thing
but-
that goes back to
way
at
back
least
in the
Baron
day.
and Luthien, obviously, because
Oh yeah, but much. I think it goes further.
I think
back
it
than
does go
that.
back further than that. Yeah.
I don't remember, but yeah, and it's harmless. I would never, cause any harm to cats.
No, we know
I
that.
just want to make sure we all are aware.
We
of that.
know that, of course. Unless it was Tevildo,
So-
that guy. That
Well,
guy
yeah,
had it coming.
Yeah, he did. I mean, that's a truly evil cat.
Yeah, he'd throw his golden collar into the volcano.
Yep. Oh goodness. So we're gonna get to Final Jeopardy, if you will.
Yeah.
This is Gollum's final question. This is for all the marbles, if you will. So then he thought the time had come to ask something hard and horrible. This is what he said.
This thing all things devours, birds, beasts, trees, flowers. Gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to meal, slays kings, ruins town, and beats high mountain down.
Poor Bilbo sat in the dark, thinking of all the horrible names of all the giants and ogres he had ever heard told of in tales, but not one of them had done all these things. He had a feeling that the answer was quite different, and that he ought to know it, but he could not think of it. He began to get frightened, and that is bad for thinking. Gollum began to get out of his boat. He flapped into the water and paddled to the bank. Bilbo could see his eyes coming towards him. His tongue seemed to stick in his mouth. He wanted to shout out, "Give me more time! Give me time!" But all that came out with a sudden squeal was, "Time! Time!" Bilbo was saved by pure luck, for that, of course, was the answer.
Wow.
Just wow.
Talk about your luck.
I mean, this is clear. Again, we've talked about the role of luck.
Yep.
I think we really started that conversation in episode 51 when we kind of dismantled the spin on luck that Jackson put in the films.
Yeah.
But really, it's such a central, pivotal thing in this story. It's worth doing. If any of you have an ebook, it is worth just looking at the word luck and seeing how often it is mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's dozens of times, isn't it?
It is. I didn't even do a count.
Yeah.
It's dozens, like you said.
It's got to be a ton. And you're right. I mean, we did spend a lot of time talking about this with the movies, and we don't want to beat beat that dead horse, but it was really dismantled by the movies. Not only with some of the things Thorin says about we make our own luck, but also with this scene specifically, we get in the movie, Gollum is as Bilbo's sitting there trying to think of the answer, Gollum says, "Time's up," and then that's what prompts Bilbo with the answer. It's totally different from this sort of accidental slip of the tongue where he couldn't even get out a full sentence of "give me more time," and he just ends up saying time. It's completely different. That makes it. We talked about the thing with the fish. Yeah, exactly. We talked about the thing with the fish. That makes it. This makes it Gollum's fault that Bilbo gets the time riddle, and it's really not. And it's crucial. I mean, because we've seen how much luck plays a part in his adventures, and it's because he is fulfilling a role that has been given to him, and so he is going to have this luck that's going to get him out of situations that, frankly, he shouldn't be getting out of.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's key, and I love. The more I read it, the more I love this moment. It just kind of gives me chills. Yeah. It's one of those moments that just gives me chills when I read it now.
The entire plan of Iluvatar is behind this. You don't see it. It's not directly there, but it's there. And the narrator brings your attention to it. This isn't just... It would be one thing to see this and to say to yourself as the reader, man, that was a lucky break. But here the narrator actually says, Bilbo was saved by pure luck.
Yeah.
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 Calling that out and reminding the reader, luck is something that's very important, should be giving you a clue as the reader to pay attention to these moments of luck throughout, and then understanding what that really means in a bigger context with, fate and chance and free will and all of that. So amazing stuff.
Yeah. I don't know why. I think because our last episode, we talked a little bit at the end about, the difference between the serial longevity of the elves and the mortality of humans. Here's where I'm going with this. Yeah. I wonder, the fact that Gollum asks the time riddle, and Gollum has, a kind of immortality right now because he has the ring.
Oh, yeah. That's a very good point.
I wonder if, he thinks... I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to make of this because I didn't think about it before now. But, Bilbo is really trying to get out of there in a hurry. And Gollum really does have all the time in the world. He's got the ring. He knows he's going to be around for a long time. Maybe there's an element of playing with his prey through this entire riddle game is a little bit of that.
It really
as a cat would.
Yeah, as a cat. Wow.
But I don't know. I wonder if that's why he's thinking of time here, because he's just kind of thinking like he can take his time, and I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, because you're right. This whole riddle game is really him kind of toying with. I mean, he's trying to explore, can this guy really hurt me? Is he enough of a powerful creature? He has a sword, certainly. Does he know how to wield it? Is he going to be something that I can just go ahead and eat?
Right.
And I think he's trying to find his way. In this version, in the final version, Gollum never had any intention of keeping his promise.
No.
Unlike the first edition.
Right.
Which we'll get to very shortly, as a matter of fact. But
yeah, it's interesting. It's just that kind of there's something sadistic about that idea of him. Like you said, the first edition, he was legitimately playing a riddle game, and he was going to give him the ring.
He wanted to eat Bilbo, but he was willing to risk not eating him.
Who wouldn't? He's a big, fat, juicy hobbit, I mean, I wouldn't, but if I was Gollum, I would.
Well, yeah.
But certainly when you look at Gollum in the light of what we know about the later Legendarium, he really does seem kind of sadistic here.
Yeah, he really does. I agree. Well, you have the not riddle.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to see Gollum really press Bilbo, which is going to make him uncomfortable, we should point out, and scatter his wits, and he's not going to be able to come up with
I
much.
didn't even catch that. You're right.
Yep.
He sits down next to him. Boy, this is mind games
creepy.
Right here.
Yeah, this thing that's been talking about eating you sits down next to you. Hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
So...
It's got to ask us a question, my precious. Yes. Just one more question to guess. Yes.
said Gollum. But Bilbo simply could not think of any question with that nasty, wet, cold thing sitting next to him, and pawing and poking him.
Ew.
He scratched himself. He pinched himself. Still he could not think of anything.
Ask us,
said Gollum.
Ugh.
Bilbo pinched himself and slapped himself. He gripped on his little sword. He even felt in his pocket with his other hand. There he found the ring he had picked up in the passage and forgotten about. What have I got in my pocket? He said aloud. He was talking to himself, but Gollum thought it was a riddle, and he was frightfully upset.
Not fair,
He hissed.
It isn't fair, my precious, is it, to ask us what it's got in its nasty little pockets?
Wow, what a moment.
Oh, no.
Whoa.
Pawing at him and, ugh.
I don't know that I'd really quite caught that before. I mean, this is one of the things you get when you read out loud, as you get every single word, right? This whole idea of this pawing and poking, just ew.
Yeah, I know.
It's a whole new level of disturbing to it, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, like you would maybe, poke a piece of meat at the butcher shop,
Yeah, I mean, this is unwanted touching. I mean, this is like creating a hostile work environment.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, exactly. It's just,
Oh.
bad touch, absolutely. And, yeah. I know. Can you imagine? Can you just
disturbing at every
imagine
level.
just how creepy that is? You're alone. You're separated from your
I
friends.
just had a laugh, though. It just made me think of that moment in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think it was in Restaurant at the End of the Universe. When the cow walks out, the talking cow.
Oh, yeah, and that's right. And
I'm very tender.
That's right. Yeah,
like, touch this. And,
that's right.
Part of me you wanna
the
eat?
actual live cow came out, and they
my
could
goodness,
pick
no.
their cut right from the cow. Yeah,
right there.
from the live
oh,
cow.
my
It's
goodness.
great.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think of this, except Bilbo's not saying, what part of me do you want to eat?
Right. Yeah. Bilbo
Doesn't stop Gollum from thinking, well, this cut looks good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Goodness.
Another thing that's fun about this that I just picked up on is all these physical things that Bilbo does here and Gollum does later while they're trying to think. Bilbo's trying to think of a riddle, so he pinches himself and he scratches himself, he slaps himself.
Slaps himself. What is this?
It's interesting. It's like, just kind of like trying to wake yourself up or something. So
Is that maybe like to stir up a little adrenaline?
Maybe
and
so.
Maybe that'll help you think
Maybe
more?
so.
I don't know.
Gollum does it a little bit later, but I think it's really interesting.
That's true, he does.
But yeah, I mean, the question comes out, and Gollum complains. Gollum is
and he's right
I think
to complain.
rightly upset about this being not a fair riddle. I think.
But, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it is worth
We'll
noting.
get to that. We got a lot of discussion on this.
We do. I mean, I think it's worth noting. He did say one more question, and he got a question.
Yeah. He didn't say it's got to ask us a riddle. He said it's got to ask us a question.
Right. But
just one more question to guess.
Yeah. But there's a lot on this, actually. I think you've got the bit from the prologue to The Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
There's a really funny passage on that.
Direct, on-point quote from the prologue.
Yeah.
The authorities, it is true, differ whether this last question was a mere question and not a riddle, according to the strict rules of the game. But all agree, because there are strict rules of the game, of course.
Right, absolutely.
But all agree that after accepting it and trying to guess the answer, Gollum was bound by his promise. Mm-hmm. And Bilbo pressed him to keep his word, for the thought came to him that this slimy creature might prove false, even though such promises were held sacred, and of old all but the wickedest things feared to break them.
Mm.
And I think that's important.
I want to come back to that. Yeah.
Exactly. The wickedest things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll come back to that whole thing, but I think the whole idea of the wickedest things is to remind us again of who Gollum is.
Yeah, because he obviously, as you said, he was fully intending to break that promise from
never
the beginning.
planning to keep it.
And when we go to the first edition, which I think we've got some I think maybe you've got a reading from the first edition a little bit later. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see. He actually was planning to keep his promise. He wasn't that wicked at the time. He wasn't.
That's right. The original version, he was not.
Yeah, but yeah, I do love that bit from the prologue. The authorities that differ as to,
authorities.
like
I know.
like the I don't know.
It's like the refs,
Like the
looking to
commissioner,
New York
the
to-
commissioner's
yeah,
weighed in on this one. The commissioner of the National Riddle League
Riddle League.
has weighed in. But it is interesting, as strange as this may seem to us, the idea of ending a riddle contest with this kind of not really a riddle, but more of an unanswerable question, which may or may not be cheating. This is actually also one of those things that's established in Germanic mythology. We talked last time about how there is this long tradition of riddles in Germanic mythology and medieval literature. And both Anderson and Ratliff have pointed out, and I got this little bit from Anderson, but they both have basically pointed out that the two greatest riddle contests in Old Norse literature both end on the same sort of questionable non-riddle. And one of these is in a work called, I'm sorry that I have agreed to say this,
Going to butcher this.
The Lay of Vafthrudnir in the Elder Edda, and the other is in a work called The Saga of King Heidrek the Wise. I have not read either of those works, but I probably should, because
At some point
it's
we
a
should read
fascinating
the
thing.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, both of these are two of those Old Norse works that Tolkien was inspired by to put this riddle contest in there, and they both end with this kind of unanswerable question. So
That's interesting.
And this whole question of was it a legal move or not? And yeah, I think that's neat, and it's just one of those places where knowing this history kind of helps enrich your reading of The Hobbit.
Well, it really does, and that's why I love these things like the Annotated Hobbit or the History of the Hobbit, because they shed so much light on it.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'm still stuck on your idea of a National Riddle League. I'm thinking, are you ready for some riddles? A Monday night question.
Oh, Monday night question. Oh man.
Oh,
no, that's
goodness.
too funny, man.
Good stuff. It's interesting. We'll see now as he tries to answer this question. We actually aren't reading a lot of this discussion, but his thought process is based on what's in his own pockets. This is kind of echoes what we've seen before. Everything's based on his own experience, which is very limited.
Right.
So when he starts trying to think outside the box, or outside the cave, as the case may be, he has a very hard time.
Yeah.
The daisies thing gave him some trouble. The eggs thing gave him some trouble. For him to be quick on it, it's got to be something that has an immediate reference to his day-to-day life.
To his experience, his
like
day-to-day
fish.
experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so here he's immediately thinking of all these charming things he keeps in his pockets,
Delightful
right?
things like knives and I'm sorry,
Goblin's
fish
teeth
bones and
wet
goblin's teeth and wet
shells.
shells. Yeah.
Batwing.
Yeah, and when he tries to think of something somebody else would keep in their pockets, it's like maybe
First
a
thing
knife.
is knife.
I don't know, something to stab somebody with, I guess, because that's what people carry.
That's what I'd want to have.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I
It is
like,
kind of a hint that he's lost this ability to relate to others, hasn't he? He's just been.
he
down
really
the trail.
has. And 500 years.
Yeah, 500 years alone will do that to you.
Yeah.
So I've heard. Mostly from this book.
So I've heard. Yeah, I really don't know personally.
Yeah.
500 years will give you such a crick in the neck.
Oh man!
Infinite cosmic power.
Living space.
Robin
There's
Williams,
your
man.
Aladdin reference, folks. We try to entertain.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, was Robin Williams
Robin
brilliant
Williams,
in that
the
film.
legend in that movie.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
I wonder if even half of what he said was scripted or ad-libbed.
I'm sure. I'm sure a lot of it was ad lib.
Yeah.
How do you write
Phenomenally
that?
good stuff.
How do you
I
write
don't
some of
know.
that dialogue, man?
I really just don't have a clue.
Suddenly dropping a Jack Nicholson reference, and a good Jack
Seriously.
Nicholson.
I mean, there's
What
not
you
gonna be
gotta do, Sparky, is you gotta be yourself. That's my terrible Jack Nicholson voice.
That is a terrible Jack
Thank you.
Nicholson. but
Everybody
but
should
what it
have
is,
a
it's
terrible Jack Nicholson impression, right?
Everybody should.
Yeah.
Or actually, I think everybody should have a terrible Christopher Walken impression. Because what this show needs is more cowbell.
Oh man, that was pretty
terrible-
bad. That was pretty bad.
Well, because I literally just came up with it on the
Thank you,
spot.
but thank you for embarrassing yourself with me.
Everybody needs to be embarrassed every now and then.
Yeah, keeps us
If I
humble.
told you that I actually could do a Christopher Walken, and I just chose not to do it, I'm kidding. I don't know that I
We
can
would
do
all
a
be very
Christopher
impressed.
Walken.
No,
Yeah,
he's got to be a tough one. I've never tried.
that was my
I'm
first
sure
effort.
as soon as we are done recording here, I'm gonna go into the bathroom and do a whole bunch of Christopher
and
Walken
watch
voices.
and watch the Continental.
Yeah.
And try to figure out how to.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction or one of those, and just go on.
Oh goodness! All right. Well,
So
Gollum ends up guessing wrong. I love this. He even at the end he still cheats. He tries to get two answers.
two
at the
answers
end.
in at once, string or nothing. Yeah.
That's definitely a violation.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the tape on this one. Let's get a judge's ruling.
Well, string
Yeah,
came
an
out first, so
authority's
that's going to
ruling, I
count as
should
the
say.
third answer. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if nothing is what's in his pocket, I'm sorry, that's not a valid guess.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's interesting. He does more of that physical stuff, the hissing and spluttering and rocking himself as he's trying to think
slapped
of it.
his feet, wriggled and squirmed.
Yeah. You really see him just kind of nervous.
Just flailing, really.
And you wonder why he's nervous. I think he's just getting frustrated.
He knows. He's down to one guess, and he has absolutely no clue.
Yeah, true.
No context at all. This isn't
That's
a
true.
riddle he can solve.
He's
It
going to
is,
lose his. He's gonna
like
lose
you
his
said, an
meal.
unanswerable question, and he's going to lose. Now, which is funny because he doesn't really care whether he loses. He's still going to try to kill Bilbo, but
That's a good point.
I think he would have rather done it without a fight.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You know, and have Bilbo say, "Well, okay, I guess you're right. I lose. Eat me."
Yeah.
Which, you know, Bilbo's not going to say.
No. You know what is interesting, though? Throughout this whole thing, Gollum has said "my precious" a few times, hasn't he?
Yeah, I believe, but he's talking to himself.
He's talking to
hasn't
himself, I know, but I mean...
Well, and we get that at the beginning. We get the fact,
that he called himself my
always
precious.
called himself my precious. I don't think
I know,
at this
but-
point.
I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking of it, you know, with the hindsight of the assimilation phase, you know, where precious is a reference to the
But
ring.
even when he's referencing the ring, he
doesn't.
In here at least, he refers to it as my birthday present.
Oh, you're right.
On multiple occasions. So I'm trying to see if maybe there's
if he
another.
does ever refer to the ring as the precious.
I don't see it.
I think the narrator calls it a precious ring, but that's it. Which is kind of, yeah, I think you're probably right. There's one thing that
He does call it precious at one point. He says if it's got the present, our precious presents. This is in the stuff that we'll get into next episode. It's
Maybe
in the escape,
so
but he
maybe
calls
a-
it my
maybe a
birthday
bit of a
present a
stretch.
third time there too. So it seems like his primary word for it is my birthday present.
Yeah.
In fact, there's another one. There's 4 at least.
And he does use my precious to refer exclusively to himself in the first edition for sure. So
Yes,
I'm probably
yeah.
stretching a bit there, but
Maybe. But let's go ahead. I've got a fairly lengthy passage from the first edition that we wanted to bring in. Again, I apologize for the length of it, but it's so different from this version that you all are reading and that most of you, I would assume, are extraordinarily familiar with. So it's definitely worth reading. We're picking up right after Gollum's wrong answer, but this time in the first edition. "Both wrong," cried Bilbo, very much relieved, and he jumped at once to his feet, put his back to the nearest wall, and held out his little sword. But funnily enough, he need not have been alarmed. For one thing, Gollum had learned long ago, was never to cheat at the riddle game, which is a sacred one and of immense antiquity. Also, there was the sword. He simply sat and whispered. "What about the present?" asked Bilbo. Not that he cared very much. Still, he felt that he had won it pretty fairly, and in very difficult circumstances, too. "Must we give it the thing, precious?" "Yes, we must. We must fetch it, precious, and give it the present we promised." So Gollum paddled back to his boat, and Bilbo thought he had heard the last of him. But he had not. The hobbit was just thinking of going back up the passage, having had quite enough of Gollum and the dark water's edge, when he heard him wailing and squeaking away in the gloom. He was on his island, of which, of course, Bilbo knew nothing, scrabbling here and there, searching and seeking in vain, and turning out his pockets. "Where is it? Where is it?" Bilbo heard him squeaking. "Lost! Lost! My precious! Lost! Lost! Bless us and splash us! We haven't the present we promised, and we haven't even got it for ourselves." Bilbo turned round and waited, wondering what it could be that the creature was making such a fuss about. Well, this proved very fortunate afterwards, for Gollum came back and made a tremendous spluttering and whispering and croaking. And in the end, Bilbo gathered that Gollum had had a ring, a wonderful, beautiful ring, a ring that he had been given for a birthday present, ages and ages before, in old days when such rings were less uncommon. Sometimes he had it in his pocket. Usually he kept it in a little hole in the rock on his island. Sometimes he wore it when he was very, very hungry and tired of fish and crept along dark passages looking for stray goblins. Then he might venture even into places where the torches were lit and made his eyes blink and smart. But he would be safe. Oh yes, very nearly safe. For if you slipped that ring on your finger, you were invisible. Only in the sunlight could you be seen, and then only by your shadow. And that was a faint and shaky sort of shadow. I don't know how many times Gollum begged Bilbo's pardon. He kept on saying,
We are sorry. We didn't mean to cheat. We meant to give it our only present if it won the competition.
He even offered to catch Bilbo some nice juicy fish to eat as a consolation. Which I don't want.
No, thank you.
Really, thank you very much. I get my sushi at more reputable places.
Yes, than Gollum's.
Than Gollum's.
Oh man.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's very, very different character of Gollum, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
very.
And it's, I don't know. I mean, we see that it was Gollum who had no intention of cheating at the riddle game.
None.
We in the later text, it is Bilbo, isn't it? I think he's got almost exactly the same. Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah.
After he says the both wrong line, which is in the first edition, he says Bilbo knew, of course, that the riddle game was sacred in immense antiquity, and even wicked creatures were afraid to cheat when they played at it. So that's another reference to Gollum being so wicked that he would cheat at it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
He's
taken
even
that
wickeder than the wicked creatures who were afraid to cheat. Right.
Yeah, that's true. So we've taken. Tolkien has taken sort of the one redeeming quality Gollum had, which is that he was at least honest about the riddle game, and he's given it to, he's taken it away from him, basically given it to Bilbo, because there just was no room for it in the later understanding of what the ring is.
He's got to be entirely wicked. He may be pitiable still, right?
Yes.
I mean, we've seen a couple moments where we really are kind of set up to feel a little bit of empathy for him.
Absolutely, yeah.
But he is still a miserable, wicked creature. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess we're not going to read all of that from the later text, but I think
no, not all of it.
They're definitely. I think definitely before we get to the next passage that I'm going to be reading, I mean, we do still see that Gollum's reaction in the later text. Not surprisingly, he's just much angrier. He's much
immediately.
He's much eviler. He starts calling him the nasty little Baggins, and he's really, you really see how testy he is here.
Yeah, definitely.
Murderous.
Well, and he's already pushing Bilbo to tell him, what does he have in his pockets? He wants to know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, he does say, what has it got in its pockets is
not string, precious, but not nothing.
Not nothing.
Basically, what is it? What is it that you have?
Yeah. And he was, there it says he was angry now and hungry, and he was a miserable, wicked creature, and already he had a plan.
Yeah.
So.
And it's not a plan for Bilbo's good.
No, not at all. It wouldn't be. So, I guess this is where I can jump in and read some here.
I think it is.
All right. And I've
right.
There we go. There's my spot. Not far away was his island, of which Bilbo knew nothing. And I would just point out, there we see a little reflection of the first edition language, don't we? The first edition language did talk about his island and how Bilbo knew nothing, but we'll see it very changed here. Not far away was his island, of which Bilbo knew nothing. And there in his hiding place he kept a few wretched oddments, and one very beautiful thing. Very beautiful, very wonderful. He had a ring, a golden ring, a precious ring.
My birthday present,
he whispered to himself, as he had often done in the endless dark days.
That's what we want now, yes, we wants it.
He wanted it because it was a ring of power, and if you slipped that ring on your finger, you were invisible. Only in the full sunlight could you be seen, and then only by your shadow, and that would be shaky and faint.
My birthday present. It came to me on my birthday, my precious.
So he had always said to himself. But who knows how Gollum came by that present, ages ago in the old days when such rings were still at large in the world. Perhaps even the master who ruled them could not have said. Gollum used to wear it at first, till it tired him, and then he kept it in a pouch next to his skin, till it galled him. And now, usually, he hid it in a hole in the rock on his island, and was always going back to look at it. And still, sometimes he put it on, when he could not bear to be parted from it any longer, or when he was very, very hungry and tired of fish. So,
yeah. Boy, some of the very similar language from the first edition.
Yeah.
But just enough different to make a very significant difference.
So much darker.
Yeah.
And
well, and then there's the mention of the master who ruled them. I mean, that's huge.
That is very huge. Yeah. And even though we don't get his name,
no,
but it's clearly setting up the idea that there's more to this ring.
Yeah, exactly.
He's paving the way for Lord of the Rings there. The language above that about such rings were still at large in the world.
Yeah.
I think in the first edition it says when such rings were less common.
Less uncommon.
Less uncommon, thank you. Yeah.
Less uncommon.
Yeah,
so
less
they were only
course,
uncommon.
Yeah. Right.
They weren't even rare or legendary. They were just uncommon.
They were just uncommon. Yeah. Yeah, because I guess he didn't have the idea of there being a small number of rings of power.
Right.
So yeah, he really does change it to make the whole thing a bit more sinister. And then I love this last little bit that I've got about how, he wore it until it tired him, and then he kept it in a pouch until it galled him, and now he
and then when he couldn't be parted from it any longer,
he still goes back and he puts it on. He doesn't.
There's that addiction language, really.
Absolutely, yeah, completely. And he's, you see how he hates the ring. He can't really bear to have it with him all the time, but he can't bear to be apart from it.
Yeah,
forever.
It is that love-hate relationship for sure.
My
goodness.
And very, very creepy here.
Oh, deeply so.
The sort of the ominous, he'll get it when he's very, very hungry and tired of fish. Because this has been his his stealth weapon. This is how he's been able to live down there for so long.
That's exactly right.
So, but I think we've got some information here from Lord of the Rings, don't we, on how he acquired the ring? Right? We wanted to go into that a little bit.
Yes, we do. Now I'm going to try to. We're probably already moving a little bit too slowly through this chapter. This is probably going to be a little longer episode than usual, but I don't think anybody's going to complain. But I'm going to go ahead and do a fairly lengthy passage from the Lord of the Rings. This is from the expository chapter, Shadow of the Past. And this is Gandalf telling Frodo. Long after, but still very long ago, there lived by the banks of the great river, on the edge of Wyrdeland, a clever-handed and quiet-footed little people. I guess they were of Hobbit kind, akin to the fathers of the Stoors. For they loved the river, and often swam in it, or made little boats of reeds. There was among them a family of high repute, for it was large and wealthier than most, and it was ruled by a grandmother of the folk, stern and wise in old lore, such as they had. The most inquisitive and curious-minded of that family was called Smeagol. He was interested in roots and beginnings. He dived into deep pools. He burrowed under trees and growing plants. He tunneled into green mounds, and he ceased to look up at the hilltops, or the leaves on trees, or the flowers opening in the air. His head and his eyes were downward. He had a friend called Deagle of similar sort, sharper-eyed, but not so quick and strong. On a time they took a boat and went down to the Gladden fields, where there were great beds of iris and flowering reeds. There Smeagol got out and went nosing about the banks, but Deagle sat in the boat and fished. Suddenly a great fish took his hook, and before he knew where he was dragged out and down into the water, to the bottom. Then he let go of his line, for he thought he saw something shining in the riverbed, and holding his breath he grabbed at it. Then up he came, spluttering, with weeds in his hair and a handful of mud, and he swam to the bank. And behold, when he washed the mud away, there in his hand lay a beautiful golden ring, and it shone and glittered in the sun so that his heart was glad.
But Smeagol had been watching him from behind a tree, and as Deagle gloated over the ring, Smeagol came softly up behind.
"Give us that, Deagle, my love,"
said Smeagol over his friend's shoulder.
"Why?"
said Deagle.
"Because it's my birthday, my love, and I wants it,"
said Smeagol. I don't care, said Deagle. I've given you a present already, more than I could afford. I found this, and I'm going to keep it.
"Oh, are you indeed, my love?"
said Smeagol, and he caught Deagle by the throat and strangled him, because the gold looked so bright and beautiful. Then he put the ring on his finger. No one ever found out what had become of Deagle. He was murdered far from home, and his body was cunningly hidden. But Smeagol returned alone, and he found that none of his family could see him when he was wearing the ring. He was very pleased with his discovery, and he concealed it, and he used it to find out secrets, and he put his knowledge to crooked and malicious uses. He became sharp-eyed and keen-eared for all that was hurtful. The ring had given him power according to his stature. It is not to be wondered at that he became very unpopular, and was shunned when visible by all his relations. They kicked him, and he bit their feet. He took to thieving, and going about muttering to himself and gurgling in his throat. So they called him Gollum, and cursed him, and told him to go far away. And his grandmother, desiring peace, expelled him from the family, and turned him out of her hall. He wandered in loneliness, weeping a little for the hardness of the world, and he journeyed up the river till he came to a stream that flowed down from the mountains, and he went that way. He caught fish in deep pools with invisible fingers, and ate them raw. One day it was very hot, and as he was bending over a pool he felt a burning on the back of his head, and a dazzling light from the water pained his wet eyes. He wondered at it, for he had almost forgotten about the sun. Then for the last time he looked up and shook his fist at her. But as he lowered his eyes he saw far ahead the tops of the misty mountains, out of which the stream came. And he thought suddenly it would be cool and shady under those mountains. The sun could not watch me there. The roots of those mountains must be roots indeed. There must be great secrets buried there, which have not been discovered since the beginning. So he journeyed by night up into the highlands, and he found a little cave out of which the dark stream ran, and he wormed his way like a maggot into the heart of the hills, and vanished out of all knowledge. The ring went into the shadows with him, and even the Maker, when his power had begun to grow again, could learn nothing of it. And I apologize for a very long reading.
No, it was great. It gives me chills, that passage.
It's a very important section, and it's, yeah.
And it's very powerful. You know, you talked about the pity we feel for Gollum, and we really do see that there. I mean, obviously it would be impossible to pity him murdering his friend Deagle in cold blood.
Certainly, I pity Deagle more, but
yeah, but the things that, you know, the way he's, you know, the way he weeps for the hardness of the world, you know, you start to pity him a little bit there, and you know,
there's some tenderness there that you're like,
there is, and he realizes, you know, maybe he realizes the tremendous mistake he's made.
Yeah. Just a little bit of remorse, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. But so at least at that time, you know, even though he is certainly a wicked and miserable creature now, maybe there was still some good in him back then.
Yeah.
And maybe he was, I don't know, more like a good person who was occasionally drawn to do evil things, as opposed to what he is now, which is
truly evil.
Truly evil.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning just. You know, for those who maybe don't remember this, you know, we are told at the beginning of Lord of the Rings that there are 3 breeds of hobbits, because there's always three. There's always three.
It seems.
Of everything. So the hobbits are actually the hobbits of the Shire descended from the breeds of the Harfoots, the Stoors, and the Falahides. They actually migrated west as early as the year 1150 of the Third Age, and the Shire was founded in 1601 of the Third Age.
Wow, quite a bit later.
So they definitely spent some time in migration. But here we see that these are stores, so these are related to hobbits. But the timeline, actually, it's important to keep the timeline in mind, because this is actually much later than the founding of the Shire, isn't it?
It is. We know that Deagle found the ring and was murdered by Smeagol in Third Age 2463. So we're talking about over 800 years after the founding of the Shire. But it's still almost 500 years before Bilbo's journey.
Right.
So it's a very long period of time. And I think that's why we get Gandalf's comment that they were akin to the fathers of the Stoors. So they, were like a branch of the family tree, so to speak, that had broken off because they didn't journey west with the rest of the Stoors.
So they'd be cousins of the hobbits of the Shire.
Cousins would be a good way to,
Important not to think of these as ancestors of the hobbits of the Shire, because
that's right.
These are not.
They're not. You're right. They're absolutely not. They're parallel development, and that they are, at this point, 500 years or so before Bilbo's journey, already, well after the migration.
Yeah.
So there's no word on whether there are any, Stoor settlement of the Stoors that remain over there by the Anduin, and I think they even touch on that a little bit in the Hunt for the Ring in Unfinished Tales.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But we can, certainly assume that any that did exist would have been wiped out or abandoned, as the shadow spread during the end of the third millennium there.
We should probably look into that and see what's in Unfinished Tales.
Maybe that'll be a good thing for our postscript.
For our
reference
postscript,
Unfinished Tales.
Yeah. I got to get some word nerdery in here.
Yeah.
So the name Smeagol.
That's what I pay you for.
Yeah. That's what you what me for?
That's what I congratulate you for.
Yes.
That's what I compliment you for.
Pay me in praise.
Rainbows and
praise
smiles.
Yeah.
Pay you in rainbows and smiles.
Speaking of smiles.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. The word Smeagol, according to Tolkien's Nomenclature of the Lord of the Rings, which is published in The Lord of the Rings Companion. It's actually a little appendix he wrote.
We talked about that a couple episodes ago, didn't we?
Did.
It was for translators. Yeah.
He wrote it in the 60s for translators to help them understand the obscure English roots of some of these words.
Right.
But Smeagol, according to Tolkien, comes from Old English Smeal, S-M-Y-G-E-L, which means burrow, and is actually the origin of the word smile, as in great smiles, which is why I made that awful pun a moment ago.
That was a terrible pun.
Yeah, thank you. I know. I excel at those. But
you should be beaten with a dead fish for that one, really.
A dead cold fish.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But yeah, interesting. It's just his name comes from a root meaning burrow. We get the description of him that he dived into deep pools. He burrowed under trees and growing plants. He's always looking for the roots of things. Just a little bit of neat word nerdery there from Tolkien.
Yeah.
He's always good for that.
I totally agree. There was something that I noticed in the, totally not on the word nerdery subject, though that was awesome. In that passage that I just read, but then compare it to the current version. In the first edition, when he can't find the ring, he says, "Bless us and splash us." Here, that becomes "curse us and crush us."
I did notice that too, yeah.
Oh, man.
It's like Gollum is so evil he can't even say the word bless now. Tolkien has to change it to
I know that's in the reading we're about to do, but I thought I'd mention that ahead of time.
Yeah.
That's really, really just,
Yeah, I did pick up on that, yeah.
Yeah. So, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and read that little bit. We get some. I know this is duplicating what we already read in the first edition. It's duplicating the end of that, but it's worth reading because of those differences.
Because of the changes, yeah.
Yeah. That is what was in his wicked little mind as he slipped suddenly from Bilbo's side and flapped back to his boat and went off into the dark. Bilbo thought he had heard the last of him. Still, he waited a while, for he had no idea how to find his way out alone. Suddenly, he heard a screech. It sent a shiver down his back. Gollum was cursing and wailing away in the gloom, not very far off by the sound of it. He was on his island, scrabbling here and there, searching and seeking in vain. "Where is it? Where is it?" Bilbo heard him crying. "Lost it is, my precious, lost, lost. Curse us and crush us, my precious is lost." "What's the matter?" Bilbo called. "What have you lost?" "It mustn't ask us," shrieked Gollum. "Not its business, no, Gollum. It's lost." Wow, that's going to hurt.
I bet.
That does answer one of our questions.
Very nicely done.
Thank you. He does address the ring as my precious. Curse us and crush us, my precious, is lost.
There we go. Okay.
So he does. Even though he typically refers to it as his birthday present and to himself as my precious, there is a direct reference to the ring as my precious.
I still think I'm digging a little bit by saying he names it. You know, he accidentally says the answer, but
yeah.
But yeah, no, good catch that it is actually referred to.
My
as that
goodness,
here.
what a moment! I mean,
Oh yeah.
But yeah, the curse us and crush us is a big thing. The reminder that he's wicked. This is what was in his wicked little mind. And yet, look at that key line. I think we talked about this a couple of times before. Bilbo thought he'd heard the last of him. That's an exact line from the first edition, but here it means something entirely different.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, there we're told.
There he thought he was just going to disappear and not bring him the present.
Right, but he was wrong because he was going to come back and give him a gift.
Right.
Give him what he won.
But here,
Tell the gentleman what he won. Oh, no ring. So what's behind door number 2? But
here Bilbo
of course, he's
is
still going to come back
to
eat him.
Right.
So,
and Bilbo is happy. Bilbo thinks he's seen the last of him and is kind of happy about it because he's just happy to see the back of him.
Yeah.
It's nice to see
he doesn't
that
exactly
thing
know
walking
how he's
away.
going to get out, but
Right. But
man, I think I'm going to be feeling those golems tomorrow morning. I don't know how Andy Serkis did it.
I remember him talking about some kind of special juice blend he made.
Special-
Well, we should have looked into that
thankfully, I won't be doing much of this again. I mean,
for a while.
I think we've got one more. I've got, maybe a couple more reads, next chapter, next episode. And then after that, we don't have to worry about it until Lord of the Rings.
Until Lord of the Rings.
Till Two Towers, for that matter.
Yep.
So, just the comparison with first edition is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And then, especially from Bless Us and Splash Us to Curse Us and Crush Us. But even here, he's still even more angry with Bilbo, rather than just being disappointed. In the first edition, he's disappointed that he doesn't have the ring he promised. And here, it's more, it's obvious.
He's disappointed that he can't make good on his promise, which is very key.
Yeah.
Here, he's angry that he
doesn't have his weapon.
Easily murder Bilbo. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my goodness! So he starts kind of putting 2 and 2 together, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. And Bilbo does try to, he does kind of try to keep him on task. Kind of keep him focused on. Well, sorry, you lost the game.
Yeah, come let me out. Show me the way out. You told me you would.
Yeah, he doesn't want him thinking about it more than he needs to.
No. There's one line here that we're not reading, but I want to mention. Utterly miserable as Gollum sounded, Bilbo could not find much pity in his heart.
Oh, yeah. That's important.
We're going to come back to that next week. So I just thought I'd point that out.
Yep.
So you've got a little bit to read here, right?
Yep, I do. But you never guessed my last question, and you promised, said Bilbo.
Never guessed,
said Gollum. Then suddenly, out of the gloom, came a sharp hiss.
What has it got in its pockets? Tell us that. It must tell first.
As far as Bilbo knew, there was no particular reason why he should not tell. Gollum's mind had jumped to a guess quicker than his, naturally, for Gollum had brooded for ages on this one thing, and he was always afraid of its being stolen.
Oh my!
So he does. I mean, he's pieced it together.
He's pieced it together, starting to think it through.
He wants Bilbo to admit it. Bilbo does not.
No.
Again, I think back to his luck, the participation of Iluvatar here. He can't think of a particular reason not to tell him. He just doesn't.
Exactly.
It is as if the thought was placed into his head.
Like
he
do
doesn't
not
know why
tell
he's
him.
not telling. Yeah, do not tell him. He doesn't know why. He's just something is telling him. Do not tell him. It's like it's a feeling he has.
Yep. It's pretty amazing. Gollum keeps pushing him, and I'm going to go ahead and read the last section of tonight's section. The last section of tonight's
section of the section.
Because I'm the leader of redundancies.
But it wasn't a fair question,
said Gollum.
not a riddle, precious. No.
Oh, well, if it's a matter of ordinary questions, Bilbo replied, then I asked one first. What have you lost? Tell me that.
What has it got in its pockets?
The sound came hissing louder and sharper, and as he looked towards it, To his alarm, Bilbo now saw two small points of light peering at him. As suspicion grew in Gollum's mind, the light of his eyes burned with a pale flame. "What have you lost?" Bilbo persisted. But now the light in Gollum's eyes had become a green fire, and it was coming swiftly nearer. Gollum was in his boat again, paddling wildly back to the dark shore, and such a rage of loss and suspicion was in his heart that no sword had any more terror for him. Oh my. Oh my. Bilbo is in deep at this point.
Yeah.
The suspicion is now almost confirmed. I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter if Bilbo tells him, "I've got my diary in my pocket," or "I've got a phone book filled with all the numbers of the
at this point,
Hobbit girls."
Gollum's
Sorry, he is a bachelor and a rich one at that.
His little black book. We know about the red book. We've never seen the black book.
The little black book of Westmarch.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Gollum has made up his mind. Gollum knows that Bilbo has his ring, he does want to hear him say it. I don't think he would care what,
He's not
what
going
Bilbo
to change
says.
his
He's like,
mind.
no, yeah.
Yeah, you have the ring.
Yeah.
I am coming for you.
Mm-hmm. And Bilbo,
goodness.
to his credit, he doesn't know for sure. He doesn't really know at all that what Gollum is looking for is what's in his pocket.
No, he has no clue yet. He'll find that out next episode.
Yeah, but he is starting to kind of pick up on it by the end of this section that we've read today and by the beginning of the next one.
Yeah, and boy, that's going to be a good one.
It's just creepy and
yeah,
ominous.
Ominous. That is a good way of putting it.
I like, Gollum does insist it wasn't a fair question.
Yeah.
You cheated. You broke the rules.
Did. And he's right. Well, yeah. But the minute he didn't say...
although it is interesting, the passage just before that, which we didn't read, between what I read and you read, it says, after all, he had won the game pretty fairly.
Yeah, pretty fairly. I think that was also in the first edition passage.
Was it?
That
Okay.
he felt, yeah, there's something about... I'm trying to find it.
I guess what I'm thinking about that is, while you look for that, pretty fairly implies that he feels like it wasn't entirely fair.
Yeah, what about the present as Bilbo? Not that he cared very much. Still, he felt that he'd won it pretty fairly and in very difficult circumstances, too.
Okay, yeah.
Pretty fairly. You're right. There's very much that implication that there's question over it. There's some sort of lingering doubt hovering over the legitimacy of his victory.
Yeah.
But Gollum tried to answer the question. You didn't file a formal protest at the time, so your opportunity now to appeal is gone.
Yeah. You should have thrown your challenge flag then.
Yeah, exactly. You're out of challenges. You're in the 2-minute warning. Mm-hmm. Oh, goodness. Another American football reference. We like those. At least I do.
Yeah, I watch a little American football.
I know. Give me a hard time.
I'm not the big fan you are, but
no,
I do watch it.
That's all right. So, well, I think that actually wraps it up for our discussion. Folks, be sure to join us again next week as we finish up this chapter. And then after next week, we're going to be taking the next 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. We want you all to be able to spend that time with your families and not be boring them all to tears at the dinner table by making them listen to us talk about fighting off wargs.
Right. That is correct. But we will be back on January 7th. And that's when we're going to find out just how quickly dwarves can climb trees.
Rather quickly, I suspect. And after that, we'll stay back on our weekly schedule for as long as we remain at our Patreon goal. Speaking of which, big thanks to our Patreon family who's made that possible. Now, before we get on to Bartleman's Bag, we want to take a minute again to ask you to consider joining that family at patreon.com/prancingponypod if we've earned your support. As you know, both Sean and I invest several hours into each and every episode, and we are happy to do it, but we're also very grateful for the resources you provide. In fact, it is thanks to that family that we've been able to move to weekly episodes. And we do have another big goal to reach, hoping to do a live episode at Mythmoot or some other fan gathering. And we are a little over halfway there, so see if you can join us and help out on that. And, of course, we have some really cool rewards to help make it worth your while, like exclusive content.
Exclusive content like our postscripts to each episode and also our quarterly specials on specific topics. But
that was a fun one.
That was a fun one that we just wrapped up not long ago. And our next one on that will be in a few months. But as for those postscripts, those we record, as you guys know, we record these episodes a couple of weeks in advance, and then we listen to the episodes before they release. What we do with the postscripts is, if there are any topics that we wished we had done a little bit more research on, or any mistakes or occasional mispronunciations, questions, and just other fun stuff like that, we put that into a short, roughly 10-minute postscript that is available to our Patreon supporters.
Absolutely. And that exclusive postscript usually releases the same day as the episode that it follows. So if you want access to those bonuses, be sure to join the Fellowship of the Podcast. We also want to take a moment to thank those of you who have joined. You really are genuinely helping to make this show even better. And I don't want to forget a very special shout out to Jason in British Columbia, our patron at the Kierdan's contribution tier. Folks, if you want a personalized shout out on our episodes, now you know where to go.
And while we do really appreciate your support, we don't want you to feel obligated.
Yeah.
Only if you can afford it, and only if you think we've earned it, do we want you to consider signing up for the Fellowship of the Podcast at Patreon. Otherwise, just keep listening to the podcast as you've been doing, because we'll keep making it.
Absolutely. Today, we're bringing you a little extra, another new segment, this one courtesy of the Fellowship of the Podcast.
That's right. Thanks to our Patreon family, we're going to have the opportunity to get to know some of our listeners, and to give some of our listeners a chance to know some of their fellows.
Absolutely. In the Fellowship of the Ring, our old friend Barlaam Butterbur tells the hobbits that the Prancing Pony has a room or two in the North Wing that were made special for hobbits. And as we want our guests to feel especially welcome, this new segment is called The North Wing.
That's right. And visitors to our North Wing are chosen from our patrons at the Elrond's Honorarium and Kierdan's contribution tiers. So if you want to join us for a chat on one of our upcoming episodes, please check out patreon.com/prancingponypod.
Definitely. Now, for now, we'll likely be opening the North Wing every couple of months, but we're happy to make more room available if necessary, so be sure to check out our Patreon. Today, though, we want to welcome our very first guest to the North Wing, Lee Butler.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you.
Thank you for joining us, Lee. We're super happy to have you with us as our first guest, and I know both Alan and I are looking forward to chatting with you a little bit. We'll start with some getting to know you questions. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what do you do? Does your family think you're a total nerd for loving Tolkien so much? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm 31, so almost an adult in Hobbit years. And I live in a little town called Prineville, Oregon, which is pretty much the center of the state. Whenever you see the word Oregon on a map, it's the O. And
okay.
Nice little rural town. And I do drug and alcohol counseling for teenagers at an inpatient center here.
Oh, wow.
And I've been there for 5 years now. It's real great work. And live with my wife, Katie, here in town. She's a preschool teacher. And not everybody thinks I'm a super crazy nerd, although it's definitely my nerdy, what's the word, nerddom.
Your thing, your little
my
fandom
or whatever they want to call it, my obsession there. More so than others. My wife does more of the horror podcasts, but
okay.
To each their own. And I grew up with a family that Tolkien's been in one way or another part of what we have as readings and things. So it's been really fun. And although I got my wife to get a little involved, we did name our dog Gimli after much debate.
Nice.
And
awesome.
Yeah, little Pomeranian.
Have you trained him yet to say, "You've got my axe"?
No, but he definitely growls and only really runs in over short distances.
Nice. I was going to ask if he's able to dig a tunnel yet, if he can delve out.
There you go.
A nice
no.
dwarf delving.
He's not very good with the shiny things or tools. So.
Well, he is a Pomeranian, so
yes, he has a limitation there.
Well, let's get to a question that you almost touched on, and I'm glad you did, and certainly a question we've asked everyone who's ever been on the show, including each other. When and how did you first discover Tolkien's works? It sounds like it was part of your family. And then what was that experience like, and why do you keep coming back?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact time when. I know as a child, 6 to 7, I think, definitely 6 to 7, probably the whole year, my dad would read each night after work The Lord of the Rings to my brother and I for like half an hour before we went to bed. And the old black binders with the different colored fire around the rings, whichever edition that was for each one of those. And that was my introduction. And then when my parents pushed reading growing up, The Hobbit was just, and I read The Hobbit in there with my dad at some point, but I was naturally like, well, this is the book, I don't know, rite of passage, right? Or something that I should read myself. And when I was 8, I read it to my dad on Saturdays and didn't do the voices or anything. And then I've just always come back to it because to me it speaks, the Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit just sort of speak to me in terms of how finding the balance and the good in what we do, even when things are hard. You know, Sam and Cirith Ungol there.
And that determination.
And the determination there. And then with The Hobbit of just, I've always, I'm really glad you guys talked about your Took and your Baggins conflict. I don't really have that strong and extended family discrepancy, but the adventurousness versus the caution and being this introvert in an extroverted world for me has always kind of been something I've bonded with over the years with Bilbo.
That's cool.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, definitely. You said that your dad was reading it to you when you were 6 and 7. Was your brother older or younger?
He was younger.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he was
I guess
younger.
It's not too early for us, Sean.
I guess not. No.
I heard you guys. Yeah, you guys said that a few episodes ago. But I think, it was definitely like we passed out after a few paragraphs at our age, and I remember in like sophomore year, freshman year of high school, I picked up Silmarillion. Like, I'm this big bad. I'm gonna go read this book that's fancy.
that was me. I was in high school when I did too.
Yeah. I got through 3 sentences of the first paragraph of Ina Lindley and fell asleep. And I didn't pick it up for 10 years.
I'm sure you are not alone in that particular.
No, that's probably more often than not the case with teenagers who try it.
Yeah,
definitely, and I love that work more so. Just that's what all the it's supposed to be. But the King Arthur and the legends, I was like, all right, this is really cool. And also I found some, especially in Turin's story, and you guys talked about it, how he that misguided goodness where he loses his intentions. He can't support his intentions very well with his actions. Has been a lesson for me and something that I always kind of go back to.
That's a really good way of putting that.
Yeah,
the gap between his intentions and his actions.
Yeah. Because you're right. Unlike some of the truly,
the truly bad guys,
evil characters.
Yeah.
But guys like Eol or even Feanor, to a very large extent. Turin never seemed to really have that.
Right.
Instead, it was just a gap between, like you pointed out, between his intentions and his ability to carry it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just mistake after mistake, and
oftentimes, poor decision-making abilities.
Absolutely,
let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But
he was.
That was sort of that tragic flaw. Was just his poor judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very much that component where the elves are supposed to be the extreme of good human qualities. He definitely embodies where we fall down.
Yes, that's true.
Definitely. Very well said. Well, with that, I think we'd like to get to know a little bit more about what you like about the Legendarium. I guess I'll start with, what's your favorite book in the Legendarium and why?
Well, I think I have always liked Return of the King. And I definitely, the 70s cartoons were always fun to watch. And I always liked those. But for me, the Scouring of the Shire is my favorite
that's such a great
portion of all of it.
Yeah.
Frodo's humanity and compassion, even at the end, and with Saruman, and that you have to come home, good or bad, and how that kind of parallels Sam coming home at the end with Frodo leaving. Has always been my favorite book. And then you get the Houses of Healing and different components, and for some reason, I don't know, the description of the Towers of the Teeth more than other descriptions growing up was definitely like, wow, this is evil.
Yeah.
And that's always
that's
where
one of the scariest descriptions, I think. Yeah.
It really is.
some of the
Yeah,
scariest prose
more-
ever.
Yeah, and that section of the Lord of the Rings specifically, that book 6 was definitely my favorite one.
Yeah.
And then the appendices too, because I remember going back and like, oh my goodness.
Oh, there's so much richness and
much more
backstory,
stuff.
and yeah.
That's when you realize, it's like that meme that goes around, where Lord of the Rings is the tip of the iceberg and the Silmarillion is everything underneath. The appendices are where you first start to realize, oh wait, there's something under the water.
There's more. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about if you've read any of the non-legendarium works? Do you have a favorite of those? Any of Tolkien's works that don't take place in Middle Earth?
Actually, I have not. I've really been more introduced to those through listening to you guys and figuring out what they are. I mean, I've seen, of course, on the inside of a cover, Adventures of Tom Bombadil, but I haven't read them yet. Started looking at History of Middle Earth. So
Cool.
Well, History of Middle Earth's the big one, but that's still
Yeah,
you'll want to check out things like Smith of Wootton Major or Farmer Giles of Ham. Or, my personal favorite's probably Tree and Leaf, but excellent.
I'm a Smith of Wootton Major fan, but Adventures of Tom Bombadil's a really
that's a
really good one to start
interesting
with.
set of collection of poems. I mean, there's some dark ones. The Mulips come to mind, and there's some powerful stuff there. But we'll do a quick lightning round to wrap this up of just some real quick questions and answers, short ones. Who's your favorite elf from the First Age?
Oh, that's hard. I've always loved Fingolfin.
Oh, good answer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good answer. How about your favorite Hobbit?
I've always liked Sam.
Good choice.
Can't argue with that one.
Rohan or Gondor?
I'd say Gondor,
All right.
but yeah, early Gondor.
There you go.
Yeah. Not so much Gondor in decline. Not the Gondor of
No.
Denethor. So
Gondor under the kings rather than the stewards.
Yeah, there you go. All right, and the controversial one, Balrog wings, yes or no?
Oh no.
Well, he listens to us, Sean. I mean, what do you expect?
And he agreed to speak to us, which probably
you
puts him
go.
in the
Yeah.
no category.
Yes, yeah. Although they are fun to look at, and I have a really cool statue because I bought a really expensive video game. They still don't have wings.
Totally
Well,
agreed there. They are fun to look at.
They are indeed. Well, thank you, Lee. We really have enjoyed having you here in the North Wing. I think it's time for all of us to head back to the common room, though, to join the rest of the listeners. So we're going to head on over.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Lee,
Thank you, guys.
we'll see you at our next Questions After Nightfall episode.
That's right. Our patrons who visit the North Wing are also eligible to take part in our special quarterly Q&A episode recorded live. Lee was actually part of our first Questions After Nightfall that released before Thanksgiving, and I'm sure he'll be back again next quarter. And now we return you to your regularly scheduled programming, already in progress. Well, that was fun, Sean. I'm already looking forward to our next guest in the North Wing. But does Barliman have anything simple for us today since we're short on time?
Yeah, we've got one that's, I think, pretty quick. We've got a comment from one of our old friends on Facebook. Maria in Serbia caught an interesting detail in Ratliff's History of the Hobbit. And for once, somebody's additional research has actually proven us right instead of wrong.
That's awesome.
I know. And rare, too. But back in episode 57, when we talked about why Gandalf doesn't read the runes on Glomdring and Orcrist, we both believed that the problem wasn't that he couldn't decipher the runes. He just couldn't read them at that time.
Right.
And I remember us saying, and one of us, and I think it was actually you, suggested maybe they were just covered in filth and blood, and that's why he couldn't see the runes. As it turns out, the fragmentary rewrite of The Hobbit that Tolkien did in 1960, remember, this is when he started rewriting The Hobbit to kind of put it more in the
tone of the Lord of the
high
Rings.
style of Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Tolkien actually did manage to get as far as that chapter, and he gave Gandalf a little extra dialogue there in chapter 2. He said, "These look like good blades, too," said the wizard, half drawing the swords and examining them closely. "They were not made by any troll, nor by any smith among men of these days. But there's black blood on them, goblin blood. When they are cleaned and the runes on them can be read, we shall know more about them." So there you go. That's exactly the problem. He couldn't read the runes because there was goblin blood on them. And I just got to say, it feels so good to be right for once, don't you think?
Well, when you're right as often as I am, you kind of get used to it.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
No. It does feel good to be right for once. It does truly Feel
Hey,
good.
you deserve credit for that one because I'm
To
fairly
guess
certain that was
correctly.
you who guessed that. So.
What have we talked about? A broken clock's right twice a day? Something like that?
That's right. Yep.
Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. As always, we really do thank you very much for joining us. Folks,
Yes.
don't forget that we want to encourage you all to read along and take notes in your copy of The Hobbit. So please check out the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where we have links for everything from inexpensive paperbacks to some really good stuff for your collection.
And if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review, we'd really be grateful for that. I know I kind of say this every time, but those reviews do really help us get more visibility in iTunes. That means more people find us. That means we have more people listening and we have more people participating in the conversations that we have. And this community of Tolkien lovers that we're building just keeps growing, and that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. We say it every week because it's true every week. So thank you. And here's another thing we say every week, but it's true every week. Thank you to those of you who have left us a review. We do read them all, and we appreciate all the nice things you say about us, even if we are still somewhat baffled. But we really, truly are grateful. Thank you so much. Folks, make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. If this is your first time listening, subscribe. Subscribe to our, if it's the 100th time listening, but you still haven't subscribed, subscribe.
Yeah.
Through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can find us in every podcast directory that I'm aware of. And if you do have the podcast app on iOS 11, be sure to check that out since it supports our new tags for seasons and episodes.
That's right. And we want to thank all of you who have become part of our social media family. We set out to start a Tolkien conversation that everybody could take part in, and that's why we have the online common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
That's right. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your favorite old chestnuts to Bartleman at theprancingponypodcast.com. That's our new email address, so again, just take note, Bartleman at theprancingponypodcast.com, and we'll try to get them into our next episode. Well, what, about an hour 35? Still far too short a time to spend amongst such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.